My husband's coworker tried to replace me in my own marriage while gaslighting me out of my sanity. So I gathered evidence and set fire to their house of lies in the most devastating way possible. When I was at my husband's work party, I noticed something very odd. His colleague Catherine, who I knew was recently divorced, seemed way too comfortable with him. She finished his sentences, laughed a little too hard at his jokes, and kept finding excuses to touch his arm. It wasn't just casual, it was intimate in a way that felt intentional. At one point, I caught her giving me this quick smile when Stephen turned his back, like she knew something I didn't. On the way home, I brought it up. I tried to sound calm, not accusatory. Stephen just laughed and said, "That's just how Catherine is. She needs people right now." I didn't want to be the jealous wife, so I let it go. But the uneasiness stayed. Over the next few weeks, Stephen started working late more often. He mentioned Catherine constantly. He started quoting her, repeating things she said like they were profound. He picked up new music tastes and started talking about hiking, which he used to hate. I brushed it off at first, but it felt off. Then one day I called him at lunch like I usually do, and Catherine answered. She sounded casual, like it wasn't weird at all. She said Stephen was in a meeting and had left his phone. Later, he told me the same thing. Still, it nagged at me. Then the texts started. Catherine would text him during dinner, late at night, on weekends. It was always work stuff, supposedly. One night during our daughter Emma's birthday dinner, Stephen got up and left the table because Catherine said it was urgent. Emma was halfway through blowing out her candles. That night, while Stephen was in the shower, I did something I'd never done before. I checked his phone. There were hundreds of messages. Some were about work, but a lot weren't. She told him jokes, complained about being lonely, sent him playlists. They talked about everything. I confronted him. I was shaking. I read one of the messages aloud and he snapped. He said I had violated his privacy, that I was paranoid, that it was a professional relationship and I was reading into things. After that, Catherine started creeping into our lives in other ways. She sent Stephen articles about parenting, clearly targeting things I had done. She showed up at restaurants we were at. She'd suggest family-friendly events that Stephen would suddenly want to do, and then ask why I hadn't thought of them. I felt like I was being erased. Every time I brought it up, Stephen made me feel small. He told me I was insecure and controlling. Then one day, Emma came home with a new stuffed animal. I asked her where it came from and she said, "Daddy's friend from work gave it to me." She picked me up from school. My stomach dropped. I had a job interview that day. I had told Stephen I wouldn't be able to do pickup, but I never agreed to Catherine stepping in. When I confronted him, he admitted it, said it was a one-time thing, said I was overreacting again. I talked to my best friend. She told me maybe I was seeing something that wasn't there. That made it worse. I started questioning my own mind. Eventually, I saw a therapist. She listened. She believed me. She said I wasn't imagining it. She said I was being gaslit. With her support, I started writing everything down. I took screenshots. I noted every time Catherine pulled Stephen away. It all came to a head when I caught Catherine lying about a family emergency to get Stephen to leave during Emma's preschool performance. We'd talked about that performance for weeks. He promised he'd be there. She called him crying and he left. I sat there alone in the little auditorium while Emma searched the crowd for her dad. Then came the final crack. At a work dinner where spouses were invited, I overheard Catherine talking to a coworker. I was standing behind a partition just out of view. She was laughing and said, "He'd be better off without his clingy wife. I'm just biding my time." I stepped forward. She saw me. She didn't flinch. She looked me in the eye and said, "He'll never believe you. You're just the paranoid wife. I'm the one who gets him." Later that night, I told Stephen everything. I showed him the texts, the notes, told him what Catherine had said. My hands were shaking. I begged him to listen. He didn't. He called me crazy. He said I was obsessed. He accused me of stalking Catherine. Then he stormed out, said he needed to clear his head, and went to a bar. I sat alone in the living room, surrounded by silence, and I finally understood. I hadn't imagined any of it. I cried myself to sleep that night. The next day, I got a text from an unknown number. It was Catherine. Somehow she had my personal cell number. The message read, "I heard Stephen had to leave Emma's performance to help me. I'm so sorry. I should have called someone else. Let me make it up to you guys with dinner this weekend." I stared at my phone in disbelief. She wasn't even trying to hide it anymore. I didn't respond. Instead, I showed Stephen. His reaction? "See, she feels bad. She's trying to make amends. We should take her up on the dinner." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It was like he was completely blind to what was happening. A few days later, Stephen's company had this formal dinner thing where spouses were invited. I almost didn't go. The thought of seeing Catherine again made my stomach turn. But my therapist suggested it might be good to observe their interaction in a public setting. So I put on my brave face and a black dress I knew Stephen loved, and we went. The dinner was at this fancy restaurant downtown. I tried to stay close to Stephen, but somehow Catherine kept finding ways to pull him into conversations with other coworkers, leaving me stranded with people I barely knew. At one point, I excused myself to use the restroom. On my way back, I passed by a quiet corner and overheard Catherine's voice. She was talking to another coworker. "Stephen has been so supportive during my divorce," she was saying softly. "I don't know what I'd do without him. It's rare to find someone who really understands you, you know." The other person murmured something I couldn't hear. "His wife doesn't appreciate what she has," Catherine continued. "He tells me how she never supports his career ambitions, how she's always complaining about him working late. A man like that needs someone who understands his drive." I felt my chest tighten. I stepped around the corner, making myself visible. Catherine saw me. She didn't flinch or look embarrassed. Instead, she gave me that same cold smile from the party. "Elizabeth, we were just talking about work stuff. Stephen has been such a mentor to me." The calculated way she pivoted made it clear. She wanted me to hear what she was saying, but she'd never admit it directly. She'd always maintain plausible deniability. I turned and walked away, my whole body shaking. I found Stephen at our table and told him I wasn't feeling well. I needed to go home. He seemed annoyed but agreed. In the car, I told him everything I'd overheard. I was crying by this point, begging him to see what was happening. His response? "You must have misheard. Catherine wouldn't say something like that." When I insisted I knew what I'd heard, he accused me of eavesdropping, of of being obsessed with Catherine. He said maybe I should talk to my therapist about my fixation. Then he dropped the bomb. Maybe you're the one with the problem, not Catherine. We drove home in silence. When we got there, he said he needed to clear his head and went to a bar. I sat alone in our living room, surrounded by family photos that suddenly felt like they belonged to someone else's life. That's when I finally understood. This wasn't just about Catherine being inappropriate. This was about Stephen allowing it, encouraging it even. The next morning, I woke up determined to take control of the situation. Stephen had come home late and was still sleeping. I made breakfast for Emma and myself, trying to act normal for her sake. While she watched cartoons, I called Taylor again. This time, I didn't hold back. I told her everything, including what I'd overheard at the dinner. This time, she believed me. "This is seriously messed up," she said. "What are you going to do?" I didn't have a clear answer yet, but having her support meant everything. She suggested I reach out to some of Stephen's other coworkers, see if they'd noticed anything strange between him and Catherine. I remembered that Stephen was friendly with a guy named Richard, who'd been to our house for barbecues a few times. I found his number in Stephen's contacts list and took a deep breath before calling him. When he answered, I awkwardly explained that I was concerned about Stephen's relationship with Catherine. There was a long pause. "I was wondering when you'd call," Richard said finally. "Look, I don't want to get involved in personal stuff, but things have been weird at the office. Catherine talks about Stephen constantly. She's got a photo of him on her desk, which is strange for a coworker, and she tells everyone you guys are having marriage problems." My blood ran cold. "We're not having problems," I said. "At least we weren't until she came along." Richard sighed. "I figured as much. She's been telling people you're controlling and that Stephen confides in her about how unhappy he is. Most of us take it with a grain of salt, but she's pretty convincing." After I hung up, I felt sick. She wasn't just trying to steal my husband. She was actively trying to destroy my reputation, to create a narrative where I was the villain and she was Stephen's savior. It was more calculated than I'd imagined. I decided to do some digging. I knew it was wrong, but I needed to understand what I was dealing with. While Stephen was in the shower, I checked his email. There were dozens of messages from Catherine, many with attachments. Photos of them at work events, always standing close together. Links to apartments for rent. Was she looking for a place for him? For them? There was even an email where she'd forwarded information about family lawyers. The subject line read, "Just in case you need this someday." I took screenshots of everything. I forwarded the most damning emails to my own account. I needed evidence, not just for Stephen, but in case things got worse. I wasn't sure what worse would look like, but I was starting to prepare for any scenario. When Stephen came downstairs, I tried to act normal. We had plans to take Emma to the park, and I didn't want to ruin her day with another fight. But as we were getting ready to leave, his phone rang. Catherine again. He said he needed to take it and stepped into the other room. I could hear snippets of the conversation, something about meeting up to discuss a work project on a Sunday. When he came back, he said he needed to go into the office for a few hours. Emma's face fell. "But Daddy, you promised we'd go to the park." He knelt down and promised he'd take her next weekend instead. As he grabbed his keys, I asked directly if he was meeting Catherine. He hesitated just long enough for me to know the answer before denying it. After he left, I took Emma to the park myself. While she played on the swings, I called my mom. I hadn't told her what was going on, partly out of embarrassment, partly because I didn't want her to worry. But I needed my mom. I needed someone who would be on my side no matter what. I told her everything. She listened without interrupting, which is rare for my mom. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Honey, this woman sounds dangerous. Not physically, but emotionally. She's trying to take your life, and Stephen is letting her." "What do I do?" I asked, feeling like a little girl again, needing my mom to fix a problem. "You fight," she said simply. "Not with Stephen. That's what she wants. You fight for your marriage, for your family, but you also prepare for the worst. Get your ducks in a row, just in case." That night, I started making a plan. I opened a separate bank account and transferred a small amount of money from our joint savings, just enough to cover emergency expenses if things went south. I gathered important documents, birth certificates, marriage license, financial records, and scanned copies to a private email account. I wasn't planning to leave, but I needed to feel secure. The next day, I called my therapist for an emergency session. I told her about everything that had happened since our last appointment. She looked concerned. "This has escalated beyond what I initially thought," she said. "This woman isn't just interested in your husband. She wants your life, and she's manipulating Stephen in ways that are textbook emotional abuse. The problem is, he can't see it. How do I make him see it?" I asked desperately. "You might not be able to," she replied gently. "Sometimes people have to hit rock bottom before they recognize manipulation, but you can set boundaries to protect yourself and Emma." Following her advice, I decided to take a different approach. Instead of confronting Stephen about Catherine directly, I started focusing on our relationship. I suggested we go to couples counseling. He was resistant at first, but I framed it as something that would help us communicate better, not as a response to the Catherine situation. Eventually, he agreed. Our first session was tense. The counselor asked what brought us in, and I carefully explained that I felt we'd been growing apart, that work seemed to be taking precedence over family. I didn't mention Catherine by name. Stephen seemed relieved and opened up about feeling pressured at work, about how he felt I didn't understand his career ambitions. As we continued with weekly sessions, I hoped the counselor would help Stephen see the patterns himself. But progress was slow. Outside of therapy, Catherine's presence in our lives continued to grow. She started sending Emma gifts, books, toys, even clothes, always with little notes saying things like, "From your dad's special friend at work." It made my skin crawl. Then one evening, Stephen came home with news. "The company is sending me and Catherine to a conference in Chicago next month. It's a big opportunity. We'll be representing the whole department." My heart sank. 3 days in another city with her. I tried to keep my face neutral as he continued. "Actually, Catherine suggested you might want to come along. We could make it a family trip. Emma could see the aquarium." I was stunned. Catherine suggesting I come along? It didn't make sense. Then it hit me. She wanted to appear generous, reasonable. She was playing a longer game than I realized. If I refused, I'd look like like the unreasonable one. If I agreed, she'd find ways to isolate Steven during the trip anyway. That sounds nice, I said carefully. Let me check if I can take time off. I had no intention of going, but I needed time to think. That night, I couldn't sleep. Around 2 a.m., I got up and went downstairs. Steven had left his laptop open on the kitchen counter. I hesitated only briefly before sitting down and checking his browser history. He'd been looking at Chicago hotels, but not family-friendly ones. Luxury hotels with spa packages and romantic restaurants. There were searches for best date spots in Chicago and romantic views of the city. I felt sick. This wasn't just a work trip. He was planning romantic outings with her. I took photos of the screen with my phone, adding to my growing collection of evidence. As I was about to close the laptop, a notification popped up. A new email from Catherine. The subject line, "Can't wait for Chicago." I clicked it open. The message was brief, but unmistakable. "Just booked my room, connecting door to yours as discussed. Don't worry about the family trip idea. She'll never agree to come anyway. X." Something in me snapped. I'd been trying to be reasonable, to not overreact, to give Steven the benefit of the doubt, but this was undeniable. They were planning something behind my back, and they were both counting on me to react exactly as they expected. I decided right then to do the opposite. The next morning, I told Steven I'd love to come to Chicago, that Emma would be thrilled to see the aquarium, that I'd already requested time off work. The look of surprise on his face was almost comical. He stammered something about checking if the company would cover family expenses. I smiled sweetly and said I'd be happy to pay my own way. Over the next week, Steven seemed distracted, constantly on his phone. I pretended not to notice. I started being extra affectionate, planning special dinners, suggesting date nights. It was exhausting to pretend everything was fine, but I needed to buy time to figure out my next move. I also started reaching out to more of Steven's coworkers. Richard had given me a few names of people who might be willing to talk. One by one, I contacted them, carefully explaining my concerns. Most were hesitant to get involved, but a woman named Jennifer was more forthcoming. "Catherine has been weird about Steven since she started at the company," Jennifer told me over coffee. "Even before her divorce. She has this whole story about how they have this special connection, how they're meant to be together. Most of us thought it was just talk, but lately it's gotten more intense." "Has Steven encouraged it?" I asked, dreading the answer. Jennifer hesitated. "Not at first, but recently, yeah, kind of. They're always in each other's offices with the door closed. They take lunch together every day, and Catherine makes sure everyone knows about it. She's always dropping hints about how close they are, how he confides in her." I asked if she knew anything about the Chicago trip. Jennifer looked uncomfortable. "The thing is, it's not really a department thing like they're saying. It's just the two of them. Catherine arranged it. She told our boss it would be good for them to represent the company, but nobody else was even considered." This was worse than I thought. It wasn't just Catherine manipulating the situation. Steven was actively participating in the deception. They were lying to his company, to me, probably to themselves about what was really happening. When I got home, I found a package on the porch addressed to Emma. Inside was a child-sized Chicago Bulls jersey with a note, "For our special trip. Can't wait to show you the city. Love, Catherine." The presumption of it, our special trip, made me furious. She was acting like she had some claim on my daughter, like she was already part of our family. I didn't show the jersey to Emma. Instead, I added it to my growing collection of evidence. That night, I told Steven I'd found the package. His face went pale. "She's just being nice," he said weakly. "She's excited about the trip." "Why is she sending gifts to our daughter?" I asked calmly. "Why is she calling it our special trip when she's not family? Don't you think that's crossing a line?" He got defensive immediately. "You're making a big deal out of nothing. Catherine is just generous. She knows I miss Emma when I travel for work." "But you've never traveled with Catherine before," I pointed out. "How would she know that?" He had no answer, just accused me of twisting things again, but I could see a flicker of doubt in his eyes. For the first time, he couldn't completely dismiss my concerns. It was a tiny crack in his defense of Catherine, but it was something. The next day, I got a call from Richard. "I thought you should know," he said, sounding uncomfortable. "Catherine's been telling people you backed out of the Chicago trip, that you're too controlling to let Steven go, but too insecure to come along. She's making it sound like your marriage is on its last legs." I thanked him for letting me know. So that was her game. She was already setting the narrative that I wouldn't be coming, creating a story where I was the problem. She hadn't counted on me actually agreeing to the trip. It had thrown a wrench in her plans. That evening, Steven came home late again. He looked stressed. "I need to talk to you about Chicago," he said. "The company is only paying for one room. It might be complicated with Emma there too. Maybe it would be better if you guys didn't come after all." I was ready for this. "That's no problem," I said cheerfully. "I already booked a separate room for Emma and me, right next to yours actually. The hotel confirmed it this morning." This was a lie. I hadn't booked anything, but I wanted to see his reaction. He looked panicked. "You didn't need to do that. I could have handled it." "I'm sure you could have," I said. "But this way is better. Emma and I will have our own space, and you can focus on your work stuff with Catherine during the day. Then we'll have family time in the evenings. It's perfect." He mumbled something about checking with the conference organizers about the schedule and retreated to his office. I knew he was calling Catherine. Their plans were falling apart, and they needed to regroup. The next few days were tense. Steven was distant, constantly on his phone. I continued my campaign of cheerful enthusiasm about the trip, talking to Emma about all the fun things we'd do in Chicago, making sure Steven overheard. I could tell it was making him nervous, which confirmed my suspicions about what they'd been planning. About a week before the trip, I decided to take a different approach. I asked Steven to meet me for lunch near his office. He seemed surprised but agreed. I dressed nicely, did my hair the way he always liked, and met him at a restaurant a few blocks from his building. As we were finishing our meal, I saw her walk in, Catherine. She spotted us immediately, her face registering shock before she composed herself and walked over to our table. "What a coincidence," she exclaimed with fake surprise. "I was just grabbing a quick lunch. Mind if I join you?" Before Steven could respond, I smiled warmly. "Actually, Catherine, We were just discussing some private family matters, but I've been meaning to talk to you. Could we grab coffee sometime this week? Just the two of us? There are some things about the Chicago trip I'd love to go over with you. The look on her face was priceless. She clearly hadn't expected me to be so direct, so friendly. She stammered something about being very busy, but would try to find time. Then she retreated to a table on the other side of the restaurant, glancing over at us repeatedly. Stephen looked uncomfortable. What was that about? Why do you want to meet with Catherine? I kept my voice light. Well, since we're all going to Chicago together, I thought it would be nice to clear the air, make sure we're all on the same page about the schedule, about boundaries. I emphasized the word boundaries, slightly. Boundaries? He repeated, looking confused. Yes, I said, still smiling. Like how it's not appropriate for her to send gifts to Emma, or how she shouldn't tell your coworkers that I've backed out of the trip when I haven't. Just basic, respectful boundaries. His face went pale. She told people you backed out? I nodded. Richard mentioned it. He thought I should know what she's been saying about me, about us. I reached across the table and took his hand. Stephen, I love you. I want our marriage to work. But this situation with Catherine has gone too far. She's not just being friendly. She's actively trying to come between us. For the first time, he didn't immediately defend her. He looked troubled, like he was finally considering the possibility that I might be right. I'll talk to her, he said finally. About the gifts and the rumors, that's not okay. It wasn't everything, but it was a start. A small acknowledgement that something wasn't right. As we left the restaurant, I noticed Catherine watching us intently. I gave her a small wave. Let her see that Stephen and I were united, that her tactics weren't working as well as she thought. That night, Stephen was quiet. He played with Emma, helped with her bath time, read her extra stories before bed. It felt like he was trying to prove something, to me, to himself. After Emma was asleep, he sat down next to me on the couch. I talked to Catherine this afternoon, he said, about the gifts and the rumors. She got really upset, said I was misunderstanding everything, that she was just trying to be nice. She cried. He looked troubled. I've never seen her like that. I chose my words carefully. People often get defensive when confronted with their behavior, especially if they know they're crossing lines. The crying could be manipulation, Stephen. It's a way to make you feel bad for setting a boundary. He was quiet for a long moment. Maybe, he said finally. I don't know. Everything's so complicated now. He looked at me, really looked at me for the first time in weeks. I don't want to lose you. I don't want to hurt Emma. Then don't, I said simply. Choose us. Choose your family. He nodded slowly. The Chicago trip. Maybe it's not a good idea right now. Maybe I should tell work I can't go. Or maybe I should still come with you, I suggested. Not to spy or to cause problems, but to show Catherine and yourself that we're a team, that our marriage is worth fighting for. He agreed, somewhat reluctantly. I could tell he was conflicted, caught between the fantasy Catherine had been spinning and the reality of our life together. But it was progress. For the first time in months, I felt like I might actually save my marriage. The next morning, I woke up to multiple missed calls from Richard. When I called him back, he sounded agitated. Catherine's been going around the office telling everyone Stephen is leaving you, that they're planning to start a new life together after Chicago. She's showing people texts from him that seem to confirm it. My heart sank. What kind of texts? I didn't see them myself, Richard admitted, but Jennifer did. She said they were pretty explicit about him being unhappy, wanting out, planning a future with Catherine. I thanked Richard and hung up, my mind racing. Had Stephen been lying to me last night? Was his apparent change of heart just another manipulation? I needed to see those texts for myself. I decided to confront Stephen directly that night. No more tiptoeing around the issue. When he got home from work, I was waiting in the living room with Emma already asleep upstairs. I had my phone ready with Richard's information pulled up. We need to talk, I said as soon as he walked in. Richard called me today. Catherine's telling everyone at your office that you're planning to leave me after Chicago, that you're starting a new life with her. Stephen froze halfway through taking off his jacket. What? That's ridiculous. Is it? Because apparently she's showing people texts from you that back up her story. His face went pale. He sat down heavily on the couch across from me. I never sent texts like that. Then let me see your phone, I said, holding out my hand. He hesitated, which told me everything I needed to know. That's private. Not anymore, I said. Not when your coworker is using your supposed texts to destroy our marriage publicly. Either show me the texts, or I'm calling Jennifer right now to find out exactly what Catherine is showing people. Reluctantly, he handed over his phone. I went straight to his messages with Catherine. What I found made me sick. There were dozens of texts between them discussing how unhappy he was with me, how controlling I was, how he couldn't wait to start fresh. There were messages about the Chicago trip being their chance to see if they worked outside the office. These aren't what they look like, Stephen said quickly. She was going through a hard time after her divorce. I was just trying to make her feel better. I looked up at him, my hands shaking. By telling her you want to leave your wife? By planning a romantic getaway disguised as a work trip? How exactly does that help her divorce situation? I never meant any of it, he insisted. It was just talk. Fantasy stuff. I was never actually going to leave you. I scrolled further back in the messages and found something even worse. A text from Stephen to Catherine from 3 weeks ago. Booked the hotel, connected rooms like you suggested. Can't wait to wake up next to you. I showed him the screen. Just talk? Just fantasy? You booked connected hotel rooms, Stephen. He put his head in his hands. I don't know what I was thinking. She made it seem so simple, so right. Like you and I were already over and this was just making it official. And were we over? Did I miss that conversation? My voice was shaking now. Because I've been here every day, raising our daughter, loving you, while you've been planning to abandon us for someone who's been systematically trying to take my place. I wasn't thinking clearly, he said. Catherine has this way of making everything I'm unhappy about seem like it's your fault, and everything that could be better seem like it would be with her. I stood up, needing to move, to do something with the anger coursing through me. That's called manipulation, Stephen. She's been manipulating you, and you've been letting her. I see that now, he said quietly. After our talk last night, I started looking back at everything differently. How she always had some crisis when we had family plans, how she'd put you down in subtle ways. I was blind. You chose to be blind. I corrected him. I've been telling you for months something wasn't right. You called me crazy. You made me doubt myself. He couldn't meet my eyes. I know. I'm sorry. Sorry isn't enough, I said. Not anymore. You need to fix this. How? He asked, looking genuinely lost. First, you're going to text Catherine right now and tell her the Chicago trip is off, that you're not leaving your family, that whatever she thought was happening between you is over. He nodded and reached for his phone. I watched as he typed out the message, making sure it was clear and direct. No wiggle room, no mixed signals. He showed me before sending it. Catherine, I'm not going to Chicago. I'm not leaving my family. What's been happening between us was a mistake, and it's over. Please don't contact me outside of necessary work communication. After he sent it, I took a deep breath. Second, you're going to email your boss tomorrow morning and explain that you can't go to Chicago for personal reasons. What about the presentation? He asked. Not my problem, I said firmly. You created this mess by prioritizing Catherine over your job responsibilities. Figure it out. His phone buzzed almost immediately with Catherine's response. You don't mean that. She's making you say this. Call me when you can talk privately. She doesn't give up easily, I said. You need to be absolutely clear. Stephen typed another message. I do mean it. This is my decision. Do not call or text me again except for essential work matters. He sent it and then looked up at me. What else? You're going to tell HR about her behavior tomorrow. How she's been spreading rumors about our marriage, how she manipulated the Chicago trip, all of it. He looked panicked. That could get her fired. Again, not my problem, I said. She's creating a hostile work environment and using company resources to pursue a married coworker. HR needs to know. His phone buzzed repeatedly with more messages from Catherine. I took it from his hands and turned it off. She can wait until tomorrow. We're not done talking. We stayed up most of the night. Stephen finally opened up about how Catherine had slowly worked her way into his confidence. Always there when he was frustrated about work or home. Always validating his feelings and suggesting that he deserved better. How she'd made him feel special. Understood in ways he didn't feel at home. But that's the thing about manipulators, I told him. They find the cracks, and they widen them. Instead of helping you communicate better with your wife about your frustrations, she encouraged you to see me as the enemy. I know that now, he said. I just couldn't see it happening. By morning, we had a plan. Stephen would talk to HR first thing. He'd request a department transfer to get away from Catherine. He'd commit to marriage counseling, not just the surface-level sessions we'd been having, but real, intensive work. I was exhausted but clear-headed. I'm not promising I can forgive this, Stephen. You betrayed my trust in fundamental ways, but I'm willing to try. For Emma's sake, and for the years we had before Catherine came along. He nodded, looking equally exhausted. That's more than I deserve. The next day was chaos. Stephen went to HR first thing. They took his report seriously, especially when he showed them the texts where Catherine had been spreading rumors about their marriage. Apparently, this wasn't the first complaint about her creating workplace drama. While Stephen was dealing with work, I took Emma to preschool and then met with my therapist for an emergency session. I needed help processing everything, figuring out if I could really move forward with Stephen or if the damage was too deep. Trust can be rebuilt, my therapist told me, but it takes time and consistent effort from both parties. Stephen needs to be completely transparent from now on. When I got home, there were 3 missed calls from an unknown number. I had a feeling it was Catherine, so I didn't answer. Instead, I texted Taylor to update her on everything that had happened. She offered to come over, but I told her I needed some time alone to think. Around noon, Stephen called. HR had a meeting with Catherine, he said, sounding drained. She denied everything at first, then tried to say I had pursued her, but they had the texts I showed them, plus complaints from other coworkers about her behavior. What's going to happen? I asked. They're putting her on administrative leave while they investigate, and they've approved my department transfer effective immediately. I felt a weight lift slightly. At least the work situation was being addressed. And how are you feeling about all this? He was quiet for a moment. Ashamed. Stupid. Like I almost threw away everything that matters for someone who never actually cared about me. Just wanted to win some game I didn't even know we were playing. That evening, the unknown number called again. This time I answered. As expected, it was Catherine. You think you've won, don't you? She said without preamble, turning Stephen against me, getting me suspended. This isn't a competition, Catherine, I replied calmly. Stephen is my husband. Emma is our daughter. You tried to insert yourself into our family and it didn't work. He doesn't love you, she spat. He was going to leave you. He told me everything about how boring you are, how your marriage is just going through the motions. And yet he's still here, I said. He chose his family. Whatever fantasy you built up in your head wasn't real. This isn't over, she threatened. Actually, it is, I said firmly. Stephen has reported your behavior to HR. He's transferred departments. If you continue to contact either of us outside of necessary work communication, we'll file for a restraining order. Find someone else to obsess over, Catherine. We're done. I hung up and blocked her number. Then I sat down and cried for the first time since this whole nightmare began. Not because I was sad, but because it was finally over. The constant anxiety, the gaslighting, the feeling of my life being slowly stolen. It was done. Stephen came home early that day. He brought flowers, which I found both touching and inadequate given the circumstances. But his face showed genuine remorse, and that meant more than any gift could. I talked to my parents, he said as we sat at the kitchen table, told them everything. Dad basically read me the riot act. Mom cried. They're coming to visit next weekend to help us sort things out. I was surprised. Stephen rarely involved his parents in our problems. The fact that he'd voluntarily exposed his mistakes to them showed me he was serious about making amends. Over the next few weeks, we started rebuilding. Stephen was completely transparent. His phone was always accessible to me. He'd text when leaving work. He came straight home every day. We started intensive couples therapy twice a week. It was hard, painful work, dredging up not just the Catherine situation, but underlying issues that had made our marriage vulnerable to her manipulation in the first place. Catherine eventually resigned from the company rather than face termination after HR's investigation. Richard told Stephen she'd taken a job in another state. The relief I felt knowing she was physically far away was immense. Emma thankfully remained mostly oblivious to the adult drama. She asked about Catherine once, wondering why Daddy's friend didn't come around anymore. Stephen handled it well, simply saying that she had moved away for a new job. Emma forgot about her within days. 3 months after everything came to a head, Stephen and I were sitting on our back porch after Emma had gone to bed. We'd just finished a session with our therapist where we talked about trust, about how it was slowly growing back between us. I never thought we'd get here, Stephen admitted. There were days I was sure you'd leave me, days I thought I deserved to lose everything. There were days I considered it, I said honestly. We'd promised not to sugarcoat things anymore. But then I'd look at Emma, at the life we built, and I knew it was worth fighting for. Not just for her, but for us. He took my hand. I'm still sorry. I'll probably be sorry for the rest of my life. I don't need you to be sorry forever, I told him. I just need you to be present, to choose us every day, like I choose you. We weren't fully healed. Trust doesn't mend overnight, and there were still moments when I'd feel a stab of doubt, when the memory of those texts would flash through my mind. But we were moving forward, eyes wide open this time. The other day, I ran into Jennifer at the grocery store. She seemed surprised to see me looking so normal, so okay. We all thought your marriage was done for, she admitted. The way Catherine talked, it seemed inevitable. Catherine underestimated us, I said simply. She thought she could replace me just by wanting my life badly enough. But real relationships aren't about wanting. They're about building, working, choosing each other even when it's hard. As I drove home from that encounter, I realized how far we'd come. The woman who had tried to systematically erase me from my own life had failed. Stephen had finally seen through her manipulation, and I had found a strength in myself I never knew existed. Our marriage isn't perfect. It probably never will be, but it's ours. Messy, complicated, real, and no one can take that away unless we let them.